You've probably heard the story of the Courier. That nobody, shot in the head outside of Good Springs by a band of hired guns looking for a quick payday. The legend, who not only managed to rise from the grave, but travel across the breadth of this unforgiving wasteland. Or, to some, the monster of the Mojave. His story is either one of heroism or terror. All depends on who you ask. Some say the Courier was a pillar of justice, helping folk all across the Mojave, while others swear that the Courier was the worst thing to happen to the wasteland since the Great War itself. No matter what you may have heard, nobody would dare deny the Courier's actions have had permanent consequences for the Mojave as a whole. Though to understand how we got here, we need to go back to the beginning. People have different opinions on when exactly the end of the Mojave began, though most claim it was right after the Second Battle of Hoover Dam. The new California Republic, backed by the Courier, fought a second bloody battle against the invading Caesar's Legion, with the Courier's involvement in the skirmish ultimately tipping the scales in the NCR's favor, as independent factions from all across the Mojave came to his aid in expelling the Legion from that old world wall. After the Courier bested Caesar's legate, the battle for the dam was officially won, ensuring the NCR's foothold in the region. Or so it seemed. When the fighting ended, the Courier, ever the wild card, commanded the NCR to immediately withdraw from the dam and all surrounding territories, in the hopes of ensuring New Vegas's independence for years to come. The history isn't conclusive on who exactly the Courier was working for, whether it was Mr. House or some other mysterious benefactor. One thing, however, was for certain. The NCR had different plans. Labeling the Courier as a terrorist, the NCR forcibly annexed the Strip later that year, worsening the already high tensions in Freeside and other surrounding areas. Local gangs like the Kings and the civilian population of Freeside already hated the NCR, which made this sudden occupation one of the many straws that broke the Brahmin's back. The NCR would then begin a number of questionable pursuits, including sending full battalions to Lake Mead in an endless manhunt for the Courier, performing brutally inhumane experiments on any local Freeside residents unlucky enough to be out after curfew, and perhaps their most foolish pursuit of all, their expedition to the Sierra Madre casino. Tucked away in an obscure corner of the desert, the Sierra Madre is said to have been one of the last great bastions of pre-war excellence, a veritable paradise offering untold riches and the promise to begin again. Today, the only thing that godforsaken casino promises is certain death. Using tribals from the now disbanded Legion as a labor force, the NCR sought to collect any pre-war artifacts they can get their hands on. And as a result, that's when they discovered the Cloud. This toxic nightmare was unlike anything the Republic had ever seen before, corroding and poisoning everything it came into contact with, from living flesh to the strongest suits of power armor. Even brief exposure to it could bring the hardiest of prospectors to the brink of death, a property the NCR took a keen interest in. Like any nation hell-bent on expansion and protecting their territory, the NCR's mind was on the Cloud's potential as a weapon. It should have come as no surprise to anyone when they began bringing samples back to the Mojave later that year for testing. However, while the NCR remained mostly undisturbed in their dealings in the Strip, a new threat presented itself from the west. A massive, radioactive dust storm, straight out of the depths of the Divide, was headed for the Mojave, threatening to destroy entire cities and cut off countless supply routes. Divide dust storms were infamous for their destructive nature, scorching the earth and flaying the skin of anyone unlucky enough to be caught in one. The NCR, as always, was resolute in their careless attitude for the rest of the Mojave. Deciding to keep this information a secret, they began drawing up evacuation procedures, exclusively for military personnel. Meanwhile, tensions in Freeside began to reach a fever pitch. Incidents of Freeside residents being abducted by NCR forces for experimentation were on the rise. On top of that, the boots on the ground were becoming more shameless in their public executions, gunning down unarmed civilians in broad daylight. The Kings and other local combatants would occasionally get into scuffles with the NCR, but things came to a head when it was uncovered that a dust storm was headed right their way, and the NCR fully intended on leaving them behind. From that point on, it was all-out war. Vengeful Freesiders attacked any NCR soldiers they can get their hands on, while the NCR began brazenly killing any local they thought posed a threat, innocent or otherwise. Things would quickly go from bad to worse when soon after, the Strip was engulfed by a new strain of that toxic cloud. Hard to say what exactly caused this, whether it was a result of the Freeside rebels or some kind of external sabotage, but the damage was done. The NCR completely locked down the Strip shortly after, leaving anyone unlucky enough to still be inside New Vegas, including their own troops, at the mercy of the cloud. The Freesiders, now calling themselves the New Vegas Rebels, took advantage of the reduced NCR presence and continued their bloody rebellion. Breaching the gates to the Strip, the rebels aided in the escape of many of those trapped there by the NCR, fighting back the leftover military presence for as long as they could. The rebels were ultimately repelled by the NCR, though, as they took to the sewers and other surrounding areas to escape them. The NCR ordered a full evacuation of their forces from the city shortly after, knowing the impending dust storm brought the Strip's tactical potential to zero. Their precious New Vegas was a lost cause. After Vegas had fallen to the cloud and the rebellion, it wasn't long until the rest of the Mojave suffered a similar fate. That radioactive dust storm eventually arrived, and the Mojave paid the full price. The storm helped spread the cloud across the entire Southwest as flaying winds and deadly radiation mixed with the cloud's toxins, making it all the more lethal. Whole settlements and towns were either evacuated or completely annihilated. Old NCR garrisons had their communications severed, leaving them easy pickings for raider tribes and ravenous cannibals. Smaller settlements like Good Springs were hit with old-world plagues that slowly snuffed out the life of their little communities, leaving them nothing but disease-ridden ghost towns. The Mojave had become a living hell, a waking nightmare for all those unfortunate enough to still be drawing breath. Old settlements fell under the tyranny of new rulers, as tribals and cannibals used the desolate ruins as camps. Townships that had once traded bighorner steak and banana yucca fruit now played host to those with a much less refined palate. The storm suffocated the sky, casting the entire landscape into an eternal, hazy darkness. The sun had set for the last time, but in the dark, a new nightmare began to rise. One more disaster from the divide was slowly invading the Mojave. The tunnelers, subterranean terrors. We don't know a lot about where the tunnelers came from, just that they came from the divide before migrating to the Mojave. In the past, we'd only come across these tunnelers in underground or shaded areas. Must be in their nature to fear the sun, since they spend so much time avoiding it. In the Mojave, however, they don't have that problem anymore. Thanks to that thick curtain of radioactive dust blotting out the sky, the tunnelers have free reign of the place, come rain or shine. We call this little section of history the Fall. A somber name, but a fitting one. Sometimes I wonder what exactly the Fall is referring to. Maybe it was the fall of Vegas, lost in a near impenetrable cloud that killed both rebel and soldier alike. Maybe it refers to the fall of the Mojave as a whole, a land now infested with underground horrors and suffocated by radioactive toxins. Or maybe it's a nod to the fall of the Courier himself, the one man so many people blame for all these horrors. Say what you will about him, but you can't dispute that he acted in Vegas' best interests. Or at least, what he thought were its best interest. Hard to imagine someone doing anything in the name of that hellhole. But I've heard stories that back in the day, Vegas was once a sort of oasis in the wastes, something worth fighting for and over. Makes you wonder what actually happened there. What happened to the New Vegas rebels? And who actually released the toxic cloud? Questions like that don't have easy answers. Vegas was in no way the first place to be hit by the cloud, nor would it be the last. In fact, if you were to travel to any NCR-ran city in the last few years, they wouldn't look all that different from today's Vegas. But that is a story for another day.